Jai Baba. Nothing is real but God. Nothing matters but love for God. God is the only reality. All else that seems real is illusory. God and I are one. Meher Baba. Meher Baba ki Jai. Thanks to beloved Baba and Jai Baba to all of you. This is the session number 8 of reading of God Speaks. I'll try to wrap up very briefly what we have done so far, very briefly. First and foremost, why are we reading God Speaks? That's the question. The answer is we are reading to please beloved Baba because he himself has wished that each one of his lovers should read God Speaks at least once. So our attempt, our prayas is to see that we read it at least once from cover to cover. Number 2, what is the story of God Speaks? What does it say? It's a biography of a soul from creation to realization. Number 3, as I always say, Baba has asked us to read, but apart from reading, we will try to understand as much as we can. Baba himself stated that this subject is ununderstandable. We are trying to grasp with our finite mind that which is infinite. And Baba himself said, in order for mind to know that which is beyond mind, it's impossible unless the mind goes. That means unless and until we achieve Manonash, we won't be able to really experience what Baba is trying to convey in God Speaks. God Speaks, we did the creation. After creation, at the time of creation, we saw how it all started. The Vim, who am I, the Shrug, the Hooky, the Lahar, whatever you call it, that started the creation. It was automatic, it was spontaneous, it was a whim. For what? The whim to know who am I. Whim in the God to know who am I. So that's how the creation started. The moment creation started, sanskars or impressions started building up. There was an apparent, I repeat, apparent separation of the drop from the ocean, an apparent separation of the Atma from the Paramatma, or the soul from the oversoul. It's all apparent, it's all Brahm, it's all imagination, it's not real. And that one particular apparently separated, individualized, finite soul started its journey in evolving the consciousness. When Baba talks about evolution, we must understand he talks about the evolution of consciousness and not the evolution of form, which, as Baba says, is a byproduct in the factory of the evolution of consciousness. As the consciousness evolves, the form also becomes more and more complex. So first there was evolution, please. First there was evolution, and evolution stops once we get the first human form. There's no further evolution, that's finished. Then there is reincarnation. We call 84 lakhs of births and deaths. Again, those are apparent births and deaths, not real birth and real death. And that is reincarnation. So first there is creation, then there is evolution, then there is reincarnation. After a lot of thappars, we call it, slappings of reincarnation, the soul becomes a little matured, and then there is involution. Involution meaning treading the spiritual path, the path to God realization. That means the flashlight of consciousness, which was focusing on without, outside, is now focusing within. And that is the involutionary path, which is the 6 planes in the domain of duality or illusion, and the 7th plane, which is reality. So after involution is realization. So this is how the whole scheme of things is arranged. I would like to also briefly go through this one aspect which, if you follow, it will be very easy to follow through. I'll just give an example of most last species of animal. What is the most last species of animal? It is nothing but a consolidated mold of the impressions or samskaras of the most last but one species of animal, which is just dropped, the body is dropped. So that is the most last species. Now you are jumping from animal to human being. So when the soul has a form or a medium or a body, the consciousness of the soul focuses on the body and considers itself as that body. The moment the body is dropped, the samskaras just don't evaporate. The consciousness now is focusing on the samskaras because there's no body. And those samskaras now form the matter and the material of the next body. In other words, the most first human form, the most first human form is nothing but the consolidated mold of the samskaras of the most last animal form dropped. Very clear, right? Now when the samskaras of the most last animal form gets expanded, exhausted, utilized, experienced in the most first human form, then the most first human form is dropped. I'm sure I've been repetitive because once we understand that, it's very, very mechanical in that sense, musical. The notes are very simple. That means my form as of today is nothing but the consolidated mold of the samskaras of my last form dropped. And that means the samskaras have come. I have brought those samskaras. Now when all those samskaras get exhausted, utilized, spent, experienced, this form will drop automatically. And the soul will now focus on the impressions which I have gathered in this life, and I will experience a mental state of heaven or hell depending upon the prepondering samskaras, whether they are more of virtues or vice, and this goes on and on, apparently unendingly. So we have come up to that. In the 7th session, last session, we made remarkable progress from starting from the worm form, and we reached the human form. Can you imagine? From worm, vegetable was over, from worm to fish to bird to animal, and now we have become human beings in the last session, that is session number 7. Go ahead, Soumya. Any questions?
Page number 26.
Yeah, page number 26.
Six.
Yeah, okay.
Through the most first human form, the consciousness of the soul experiences and exhausts the impressions of the most last species of animal form. When all the impressions of the most last species of the animal form are experienced and exhausted by the consciousness of the soul, then the consciousness of the soul dissociates itself from the most first human form, and the conscious soul automatically drops or sheds the body association.
In other words, if someone were to ask, how does death occur? Baba explains here and elsewhere also that when all the samskaras that we have brought with us before, so to speak, taking the marching orders from the other side, and we are here with a new body, when all those samskaras are exhausted and experienced, there is no need for this particular form or body, and therefore this particular form or body drops. That is how it happens. How does that occur? When all the samskaras which we have brought for experiencing and expanding, that means spending, utilizing, are over, this body has no need, it drops.
This is called the death of the most first human form. But the consciousness of the soul is now focused or centralized in the impressions of the most first human form, and the soul is now temporarily without a form.
So now, after the body is dropped, which we call death, Baba says it is not death, because only, in a sense, 1/3 of your entire being, we have a gross body, a subtle body, and mental body. What we consider as death is only dropping of the gross body. The subtle body and the mind continues its journey in another realm, which is called the semi-subtle world, where we experience an acute mental state of heaven or hell. But we are not finished. And that's why Baba does that as a real death. Then what is real death? Baba says, none dies. None knows to die. The rare one who knows to die is never born again. That means the real death is the death of separation, death of the mind, death of finiteness, death of the false ego. That is the real death. All these deaths and births, Baba says, they are all imaginary, they are all apparent. And when that real death occurs, actually when we really die, we merge in the unity and the infinity of the Lord, and we never come back again. That's the end of the journey. Go ahead.
In order that the impressions of the most first human form may be experienced and exhausted, the consciousness of the soul associates itself with another appropriate medium, and the conscious soul is thereupon inclined to identify itself with the most next human form, which form is no other than the consolidated mold or cast of the impressions of the most first human form just dropped or shed.
I explained earlier, this is how the mechanics happen. As long as the soul has a form, the consciousness is focused on the form. The moment the form is dropped, the consciousness is focused on the impressions or the samskaras in the state of heaven or hell. It is not a place, it is not a locale. You cannot GPS and find out where is heaven or hell. It is all intertwined here and now, in the here and now. It is only an acute mental state of joy, happiness, enjoyment, or suffering, which is called heaven and hell respectively. Now what happens in heaven and hell basically is assuming that at the time of my death, my prepondering samskaras, prepondering means the heavier samskaras of the two, are, let us say, virtuous, they are good. And when we say good, it doesn't mean, basically, supposing I do a lot of charity, I help many people, I do this, I do that, in all probability people think that is good. But according to my understanding of Baba's literature, good is something which is selfless. When you do selfless service, that is good, not social service. What is selfless service? Baba says selfless service is that service in which the person who is serving does not even get a thought that he is serving. The moment we say, I have done this, I have done that, I have done, and I am putting a plaque over there, donated in the pious memory of so-and-so, etc. Adi Kaka used to say, Adi K. Irani, when he would come to our center, Bombay Center, he would say, on one hand, it's a balance sheet. You have really acquired the asset of, say, $1 million. That's what he said, assets, But you keep on bragging about it. I did that, I did. Then you have accumulated $1.5 million of liability. So at the end of the story, you are actually more in liability than in asset. So good, according to my understanding of Baba's literature, is that which is selfless, is that which is propelling us towards the truth, towards Godhead, and not in the normal material sense of good and bad. That's what. Right. So another
This
thing, sorry, just a thought. Another thing is, as I am as the consciousness of my soul is focused on the impressions and is enjoying or suffering the result of those impressions, the, the imbalance is now gradually getting balanced. It can never ever be equally balanced, quantitatively and qualitatively, never. It's only with the grace of a perfect master or the avatar, who is the eternal living perfect master, that this balance can come, and then we get what is known as liberation or mukti or moksha. But it never happened. So the moment it is coming closer, 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 about to be balanced, based on the residual samskaras, residual means remaining samskaras, I will be inclined, this is an automatic process, inclined to take birth at a place, in a family, in a state, in an environment where I get the best opportunity of utilizing and spending those samskaras and balancing those samskaras. So in that sense, many people say that, oh, I was born in this particular nakshatra, we call it, zodiac sign, and that is why I am suffering. Had my mummy held on to me when the doctor said, push, push, held on to me for another half an hour, then I would have been born into another zodiac sign, and then I would have been a happier lot. You know, that thinking is there. But no, it is all mechanically, samskarically, mechanically made in such a way that you get born in a certain place, in a certain environment, in a certain family, based on your past links with those samskaras. And then that is what is, Baba said, that is what is called birth.
This identification of the conscious soul with the next form and those following is called the birth of a human being. As soon as the consciousness of the soul associates with the most first human form, the evolution of consciousness is full and complete.
So very important to remember, the evolution of consciousness is full and complete in the very first human form. There are symposiums, there are workshops, there are all kinds of things where they talk about expanding the consciousness, stretching the consciousness, extending the consciousness. Consciousness remains the same after the very first human form. I remember reading where Charles Purdom, C.B. Purdom, who has written many books, had asked Baba that, Baba, I feel that on a regular basis my consciousness is expanding because I get to know so many more things which I did not know earlier. So isn't it that my consciousness is expanding? And Baba clarified that it is not the consciousness which is expanding, it is your awareness. The consciousness is whole and complete. It is your awareness that is becoming better and better, or that is expanding, and not consciousness.
There's an asterisk here. Meher Baba maintains that such subjects should no longer be left indefinite, although he concedes that belief or non-belief in evolution and reincarnation does not in any way hasten or impede man's spiritual progress.
There are many religious beliefs where they do not believe in reincarnation. They believe in one birth and one death. Whereas there are certain beliefs where they say that there are numerous, to be exact, they say 84 lakhs of births and deaths. And Baba clarifies it in God Speaks itself. Later on we'll come to this. But I'll just very briefly say that the very first, Baba says, in reality there is only one real birth and one real death. What is that one real birth? Is the birth of the separation of consciousness from the whole, where the drop identifies itself as separated from the ocean, where the Atma thinks I am other than and different from the Paramatma. So that is the one real birth. And after the whole gamut of traveling, evolution, creation, evolution, reincarnation, involution, when finally the bubble, which is creating this illusory appearance of a separativeness, bursts in the final stage. It is then that the bubble experiences oneness with the ocean and experiences not as I am a part of the ocean, but I am the ocean. That is the one real death. Between one real birth and one real death, there are so many innumerable births and deaths of the changing bubbles, of the changing mind, of the changing bodies, which is not real birth and real death. So Baba has very brilliantly explained that in God Speaks in one of the supplements. We'll read it when it comes, but this is the synopsis of what Baba has conveyed.
He tells us the spiritual significance of evolution and reincarnation in the following words. Quote, "It is the evolutionary struggle that enables the soul to develop full consciousness as that in the human form, and the purpose having been achieved, the side issues or byproducts of evolutionary travel, the naksh-e-amal or sanskaras, have to be done away with while retaining the consciousness intact. The process of reincarnation, therefore, is to enable the soul to eliminate the sanskaras by passing through the furnace of pain and pleasure." Unquote.
So in other words, the very first idea of creation was to gain consciousness. And that question actually has fructified in the very first human form. Because in the very first human form, consciousness is full, consciousness is whole, consciousness is complete. There is no further extension of consciousness. But Baba uses the word Nashke Amal, or it's also called the Samskaras. What is this evolutionary process? The evolutionary process is to get rid of, weed out all the samskaras which have accumulated on the consciousness, and it is not enabling the consciousness to know I am God state consciously. So in other words, the will to be conscious has been fructified in the very first human form. It's already fructified. The aim is achieved. But with because of the whole, travail of traveling through all these species and all that, it has accumulated a lot of garbage, a lot of samskaras. And those samskaras need to be eradicated or weeded out through the experiencing of pleasure and pain. And for that, this reincarnation process is necessary.
Because the consciousness of the soul, consciousness,
Okay.
there's
Okay, there's a
parenthesis, all numbered
so we'll have to
references
go to the
contained
supplement,
in the
but later. But read the whole paragraph.
Because the consciousness of the soul is fully developed in human form, the evolution of form is also complete, and no new higher forms are now evolved once the conscious soul identifies itself with the most first human form. In short, in human form, the consciousness of the soul is full and complete. The process of evolution of consciousness is brought to a standstill. The human form is the highest and the most sublime form evolved during the evolution of consciousness. Hence, in the human being, consciousness is fully developed and the form molded and cast after ages and cycles is the most perfect form or medium. The consciousness of the soul, therefore, utilizes this perfect medium to experience and completely exhaust all impressions so that the fully conscious soul becomes devoid of any impression whatsoever, and thus is able to realize its own real, eternal, and infinite state in the Oversoul.
Now we have a supplement on page number 92.
192.
Sorry?
192.
192. Thank you. 192. Yeah. Go ahead. They'll find it, Baba. You know numbers, no?
Got it. 192. Impressioned consciousness. At the request of the editors, Meher Baba added the following information. Consciousness is definitely complete as soon as the first human form is taken, but it does not start involving at that point. When consciousness first
Involving would mean does not start treading the spiritual path, the involutionary journey, the planes.
When consciousness first begins to involve, it means that the human being is only beginning to take the first step on the spiritual path.
Now there are many, on a lighter vein I am saying, there are many who, feel that they are on the spiritual path, and even ask, what do you think, on which path, on which plane should I be, and all that. I said, the simplest thing is you pinch the person, ouch, you are still gross. because in the first plane, Baba says later on, the sense of touch and the sense of taste goes away. If I give the person a hot chili and say, please munch it. If you have, oh, very hot, you are still on the gross. So you remember that
Spicy.
very spicy, pungent. So many people feel that by following a certain, religious practices and rituals and rites, and no doubt they may be very close to the path. But a very clear distinction is when you are on the path, on the first, second, third plane, which are in the subtle, which are called subtle worlds. You lose these senses. There are only 3 senses which remain, and after that another 2 will go, and only the sense of sight will remain till the end on the sixth plane of consciousness. So Baba says that when you enter, this is only the first step, and the first step is also half gross, half subtle. Sometimes you get a whiff. Many times, there are many supposedly renowned masters in the supposedly spiritual world. And Baba is told that so-and-so seems to be very high. And Baba would say sometimes, that he hasn't had a whiff, hawa, he used to use the word hawa. So if something is happening there, you get a whiff of it, or something is happening there. He hasn't even got a whiff of the spiritual plane. But we try to categorize them based on maybe their dress code, or the tikkas, or the way their oratory, or the way they, sometimes we get carried away by that. Go ahead.
Between the time of the first human incarnation and the time of going on the path, the complete consciousness of a human being, which is still an impressioned consciousness, has necessarily to indulge in a process that eventually must dislodge these impressions from retaining their hold on it, the consciousness which is complete.
At the moment, I assume that we are all gross conscious human beings. Now, one thing I forgot to say is, what is the gross body? The gross body is the shadow of the individualized soul. What is the gross world? The gross world is the shadow of the Paramatma. The gross world is the shadow of the Paramatma, and the gross form is the shadow of the Atma. That is also very important to understand. So with one shadow, I am experiencing the other shadow. With my gross form, I am experiencing the gross world. And the gross world is not just earth. it is, galaxies and whatever you call it, the Milky Way and the black hole and whatever everything gross, So you can imagine the vastness. And where does this gross world exist? It exists in space. And what is space? Space is the shadow of the infinity of God. And just as God is infinite, the space also is infinite. Because science is now discovering that the worlds are being created, stars are being created, creation is going on ad infinitum, means at such speed. And where does it get accommodated? It gets accommodated in space, which is nothing but the shadow of the Almighty. There's no shortage of space in space. It just keeps on expanding for a simple reason that it is nothing but a shadow. And if God infinite is infinite, then obviously shadow also is infinite. Right.
It is to be noted that during that period...
Sorry. I just wanted to dislodge these impressions. So my focus right now is on everything gross. Everything gross. This is gross, bodies are gross, my association with people are... And gradually when the flashlight of my consciousness withdraws from the gross, because my gross samskaras are gradually being expanded or utilized or experienced, then automatically I tend to take less and less interest in gross, because I have no impetus, I have no reason to be interested in anything gross, because now the flashlight is focusing on the subtle. And when that happens, then gradually my gross samskaras transforms itself into subtle samskaras. And when they are totally transformed into subtle samskaras, everything gross for me is non-existent. Although I am living in gross, I am talking, speaking, eating, sleeping, drinking, whatever it may be. But actually my consciousness is focused on the subtle. And that is where the person is said to have entered the spiritual part, and he is said to be a subtle, conscious human being. And so on and so forth. Similarly for mental. Go ahead.
It is to be noted that during that period, which covers thousands of reincarnations, the impressions which were hard set or dense get shaken up so thoroughly by the reincarnation process that their tight grip on consciousness becomes loose.
So this birth and death, reincarnation, I call it thappar. Thappars mean slapping, tada, tada. Happiness, suffering, you cheat somebody, you get cheated by somebody, rich, poor, high, low, man, woman, easterner, westerner, all that thappars that we get, it loosens the gross samskaras, which were very tight, which were very hard, which were very dense, which were very gross, now becomes rarefied, now becomes feeble, now becomes loosened. And that is the process of transformation from the gross to the subtle.
These hard-set, dense or gross impressions thin out or become feeble through innumerable and varied experiences of opposites. The limit to these experiences is reached by persistent reincarnations, which give experiences of opposites.
That after a long period of time, the limit is reached now. That it has become really very feeble, really very loose. It doesn't have a hold or a control over our gross world. So that is what it is. Yeah.
It is also to be noted that it is only when these dense, hard-set or gross impressions become less dense or become feeble that the limit to the experiences of the gross world through gross impressions is reached by the gross medium, the human body. When the dense, hard-set impressions become less dense, they no longer give rise to gross experience, but these less... Because these less dense feeble impressions are refined or fine and no longer crude or gross.
That means gradually, it's a gradual process through several lifetimes when gradually the gross, dense, set, crude samskaras become fine, become feeble, become loose, and gradually the experience changes from gross to subtle.
The aggregate of such refined or fine impressions is called subtle impressions.
That means what are subtle impressions? Subtle impressions are those impressions which have become very refined through the reincarnation process, as a result of which these samskaras are not capable of giving gross experiences in the gross world to the gross body. So that they are refined now. There's a refinement.
These subtle impressions give rise to experiences of the subtle type, that is, pertaining to the subtle world, and the subtle body experiences these subtle impressions and tries to exhaust them.
That means now we have progressed from gross conscious human beings to subtle conscious human beings. We have just taken the first step in the subtle world, which is the first plane of consciousness.
When these subtle impressions become even less dense and still more refined, the aggregate of such impressions is called mental impressions.
But this will take time because in the subtle plane, in the subtle plane, there are three planes of consciousness: first, second, and third. The first is just a basic. Then there is second, where you are actually established in the subtle world. And third, where you can even create miracles. In the third plane, these subtle planes are planes of energy or urja, power. You can create miracles. A dry well is there, you can just fill it up with water. Or you can even, in the third plane, you can even bring back to life a dead pre-human species. The dog has died, the cat has died, whatever, you can bring it back to life. Those are the powers of the third planar. The fourth plane is a go between the third and the fifth. It is a part in the subtle, although it's supposed to be in the subtle only, it is a plane of infinite power. The person on the fourth plane is called a Kuber or a Mahayogi, and that is the only place from which, if a person misuses his powers, he can go back right to the stone stage and start his journey again. Baba says the consciousness shatters, disintegrates, and he gives an example of a bulb which is say 100 watts, and if you pass 1,000,000 watt through that bulb, what will happen? The bulb will just shatter and go back, So that is the only place from where there is retrogressive or regressive consciousness. In no other place you can go back to the earlier species. Howsoever depraved I may be, whatever wrong deeds I may have done as a human being, I cannot be born as a dog or a donkey or a horse. Because that is an impossibility. Baba says consciousness is always progressive, never regressive. But this is the only place where if a Kuber misuses, and this is where Baba explains that powers used even for mundane good, किसी को नौकरी दिलवाया, किसी को छोकरी दिलवाया, means you do some miracles, and even if it is for material good, it is not considered as a good use of power. That's what I'm saying. Only where it helps in the spiritual endeavor, then it is considered as a good use. And if you use it for good, then you jump to the sixth. Otherwise, gradually you go from the fourth to the fifth to the sixth. The fifth and the sixth planes of consciousness are in the mental world. Baba says that there are perfect masters, always 5 perfect masters, and the avatar is always connected with the creation. That means that is why we often say that the avatar is the eternal living perfect master. Just because he's not in the body, you don't have to go searching for a living perfect master. Many people say, now who is the living perfect master today? Because Baba had said that unless there is a living perfect master, you can't progress further, And I say, you are acting as if, you can't get realized. You are acting as if you are on the edge of the sixth plane of consciousness and you want to push from a living perfect master to go from the sixth to the seventh. I said, don't bother about the living perfect master because we are connected with the avatar who is the eternal living perfect master. Whether he's in the physical body or not, he's always available to us, he's always accessible to us. So don't bother about the perfect master, living perfect master. You don't need to go there. Number one. So now, if the fourth planar, who's a Kuber, is a mischievous character, he loves to play with the toys. Like how Baba says, we used to, when we were small, we play with the toys. When we are human beings, we play with emotions, we play with sensation and all that. When you are on the plane, first, second, third, you play with powers, you do some chamatkars, miracles and all that. And when you are on the fourth plane, you still continue to play with the toys. The existing at that time, living perfect masters and the avatar, even the fifth planar, who's a Vali, and a sixth planar, who's a Peer, they have their focus on this naughty chap. They just don't want him to fall down. So if he listens to them, it's fine. Otherwise, they push him down to the third or pull him up on the fifth so that he is saved. Otherwise, he has to go all the way back to the stone state. So that is how beautifully the mechanics of creation and evolution and reincarnation and involution and realization has been framed.
When these subtle impressions become even less dense and still more refined, the aggregate of such impressions is called mental impressions. These mental impressions give rise to experiences pertaining to the mental world, and the mental body experiences these mental impressions and tries to exhaust them. When the last traces of mental impressions are exhausted through experiences by the mental body, the complete consciousness of the soul, which was all along in the grip of impressions from the instant it identified itself with the most first human form up to the last human form, which is the mental conscious human being, is unburdened of impressions. Only such impressionless, complete consciousness can realize the final experience of the I am God state of the soul.
That means as long as the impressions are there, gross, subtle or mental, we are slaves of those impressions. We cannot but behave the way impressions impel us to behave. Many people know that I understand, I know, it is not, but somehow we end up doing just that. That is the impulsion, that is the force of the samskaras. But somewhere I have read, which unfortunately I could not locate because someone asked me, where have you read this? But I do remember having read that the samskaras may impel you to take a certain course of action, but it cannot compel you to take that action. It's a very powerful statement. No, I couldn't find it. I know, I thought it was in the discourses, but I couldn't find. So in other words, we are all working out, how we do workout in a gym. We are working out our own impressions. And as long as the impressions are there, we are in the grip of the impressions. We are the slaves of the impressions. And our consciousness is focused on the form. Even if it's a subtle body, it's a subtle body, it's a form. Mental body is a mental form. Only when each and every samskaras are eradicated and experienced, what is reflected is that you know yourself as the Aham Brahmasmi state, or I am God state, or Anal Haq state, Soham state. That means it is the impression which is actually coming in the way of our experiencing the I am God state. That's what Baba is saying over here, that only such impressionless, complete consciousness can realize the final experience of the I am God state of the soul. Now I am digressing, that has been my pattern. It is said that the last thought that we hold at the time of breathing our last is very, very potent, very powerful in determining what our next birth would be like. And Baba in his My Wish says, the sixth part, that whosoever takes my name at the time of breathing his last comes to me. That means we achieve moksha or mukti or liberation. And when someone asked, what is the meaning of come to me? Baba clarified, come to me means that particular soul will experience infinite bliss eternally, no further rounds of birth and death, moksha, mukti. Now this is my intellect telling. Because if I remember Baba, who is impressionless, he has no impressions, he is without samskaras, who is impressionless. Because my last thought is of Baba, who is impressionless, I myself become impressionless. And because there are no impressions, let us understand that impressions or samskaras are the building blocks of our next incarnation, our next body. Just as how a building requires bricks, mortar, we call it khadi, cement, water, in order to build a building. Without those material, the building cannot be built. So this building, in order to have this building, which is the body, the gross body, you require the building blocks. And what are the building blocks? The impressions, the samskaras. Because there are samskaras, I am getting body after body after body after body. But if my thought is of the impressionless one, I myself become impressionless, that means samskarless, without samskars. And since there are no impressions or no samskaras, there is no scope of a new body. And because there is no body, I achieve moksha or mukti. So that is how I consider it, it works that way. So Baba says, only such impressionless complete consciousness can realize the final experience of the I am God state. Baba also clarified. When Baba talked about comes to me means moksha, mukti, whatever, liberation, salvation, it does not mean the state of perfection. Because perfection or God realization is to be had only in the human form. You cannot have God realization once you are out of the body. Out of the body, you get what is Baba calls as najat mukti or ordinary mukti, which comes sometimes a few days, 3 to 4 or 5 days after the body is dropped. So Baba says that if you are not destined for perfection, to become a perfect one or a perfect master, then at least you can get out of this rigmarole of birth and death by simply remembering me when you breathe your last. It's a very, very beautiful shortcut which Baba has given us, and I think each one of us should, our target should be that, our focus should be that, our aim should be that, and for that we need to remember him. Baba says you should start remembering from now on. Unless you start remembering from now on, it will be difficult to remember me when your end approaches. So you should start practicing his name, remembrance of his name, his form, from the very core of our being, and hope and pray that at the last, when we breathe our last, we are able to remember him and be out of this chakra view of birth and death, birth and death.
When the
Sorry. Sorry. Some thoughts keep coming. When this was being discussed elsewhere, somebody raised the hand. No. But I don't want mukti. I want to come back again and serve Baba and love Baba. Isn't that a good thing? That is what the person asked. I said, it may be a good thing for you, but it's a headache for Baba, because his job is to see that as many people get mukti as fast as possible. This is what is your wish, your emotional aspect to serve him. But what is his wish? His wish is paramount compared to your wish. And his wish, because it says under my wish, his wish is that we get moksha as early as possible. Now if you come back again with a very, in a sense, selfish motive of serving him, then you are giving more importance to your emotional aspect of serving him rather than to obeying him and following his wish. This is what I said. So basically his wish is supreme. If he says do this, you just do it. Otherwise he is not happy. We know of this story of Pilamai. Pilamai Irani was Baba's spiritual sister. She used to stay in Karachi. And she got to know that Baba used to always travel. At that time there was a third class compartment. So it was all rush and pressured and no place to sit. So she made a beautiful folding stool, a very artistic, beautiful folding stool for Baba, to gift it to Baba. So when Baba, whenever he's traveling and there's no seat available, he can just open it up and sit on that stool or chair, whatever. One day, that coincidentally, Pilamai was there, the chair was there, Baba was there. So she very proudly and happily said, Baba, I have made this stool specially for you. I would like you to open and sit. And Baba said, no, you sit. And she said, no, I would never dare to sit on this because it is so precious. I have made it with all my love and I have made it only for you. So please, you sit. So in Hindi we say, pahle aap, you know, you. It happened for a little while. Baba got so furious, he took the stool and threw it out of the running train. And of course, that was a shock for Pilamai. So what have you done? And that is where Baba gave a very important lesson, that you are giving more importance to your sentiment about the stool rather than to my words which you are expected to obey. So we then realize that obedience is so supreme and not our own sentiment. We get drifted by our own sentiments about so many things in Baba's world, you know. But most important is obedience. Go ahead. Thank you for your patience.
When the gross or hard set impressions get thinned out by the reincarnation process, they become subtle impressions. These subtle impressions can no longer give rise to experiences of the gross world.
The subtle impressions and the mental impressions cannot give, the subtle impressions cannot give you the experience of the gross world. Now Baba had said, for so many people, Aurobindo, that he was on the sixth plane, which is the mental plane, Gadge Maharaj on the sixth plane, Muhammad Mast in between the third and the fourth, and now in the fifth plane. So the question arises that I am seeing, let us say Gadge Maharaj. Gadge Maharaj was one of Baba's favorite saints. And Baba said he was on the sixth plane. That he is doing Jharu, that was his pet project of cleaning, sweeping the streets. He is singing what is known as, what is it called? Abhangs. Abhang. He is dancing and singing Abhang. He is talking with you. Of course, Baba is gesturing and he is talking. Baba is asking questions and he is replying. He is asking Baba, please take me with you. I am fed up now. I want to stay with you. And Baba is saying, don't worry, I'll take you a little more time and all that. So I am seeing that he is so very conscious of the gross. He is talking, he is speaking. How can it be when Baba is saying that it does not give rise to gross awareness, gross consciousness? That is where Baba explains that because I am gross, I am only seeing the gross aspect of him doing whatever he is doing, which is nothing but a reflection of his subtle impressions. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. In other words, he is not doing anything gross. You are seeing him as doing gross. And then Baba gives an example of a somnambulist, somebody who sleepwalks. Soumya sometimes sees that I am sleeping peacefully. I got up from my bed and I opened the fridge. I took out a bottle of beer and I had cheese and I ate, closed the fridge and came back to sleep. She sees all these things. But if I am a somnambulist, which I am not, then I would not know that I am doing all these things. I would not even be aware that this is what I did. So just as a somnambulist does not know what he is doing automatically, spontaneously. But the observer, who is in the gross plane, observes all these things happening, but I am not, my focus, my consciousness is not there. I am not doing it. It automatically appears to be doing. So that is how Baba, how brilliantly explains that people in the gross world have experiences of the gross. But they use the energy of the subtle and the mind of the mental unconsciously and indirectly. I am talking. I am using energy. I am using my brains, my mind. But how I am doing it, I don't know. It's automatic, unconscious, indirect. People in the subtle world are not conscious of the gross world, are not conscious of the mental world. Their flashlight of consciousness is focused only on the subtle. Whatever people may experience that person doing in the gross is nothing but a reflection of his or her subtle workings. He is not aware of the mental. Similarly, person who is on the mental world is not aware of the subtle, not aware of the gross, although he is walking, talking, doing everything gross, indirectly, unconsciously, without knowing that he is doing it. Like how I don't know how I am using my mind, my mental world. I don't know, but I am doing it. In the same way, with each one, gross, subtle and mental, it happens. And once you are one with God, that person is only conscious of himself being God, not conscious of mental, not conscious of subtle, not conscious of gross. But of course, he is then called a mazub or a mazub-e-kamil. And then when he gets back the consciousness of all the three worlds, retaining the God consciousness, then he may be called a salik. He is in a state of salukiyat. And when he is also endowed with certain duties to perform towards creation, more particularly towards humanity, he is called a Sadguru or a Kutub or a perfect master. So that is how it functions. So here, what Baba is saying, can you read when the gross or...
I'll read.
What it says is, these subtle impressions can no longer give rise to experiences of the gross world. Go ahead, at this.
At this stage, the consciousness of the gross conscious human being automatically begins to indulge in experiences of the subtle world. This marks the advent of the process of involution of consciousness.
Now the involution has started. Advent, the first step.
And the aspirant begins to tread the path.
That is when the aspirant begins to tread the path. P-A-T-H, capital P. Right. That means his consciousness is now of the subtle, although he lives in the gross and does everything connected with the gross indirectly, unknowingly, unconsciously. Go ahead.
It is obvious that the subtle impressions must give rise to the subtle experiences of the subtle world. These subtle impressions get exhausted by the subtle body through experiences of the subtle world, and the process of involution of consciousness continues.
So this was the supplement number 1. Now we again go back to
Page
our
27.
own page. Yeah. What page, Samir?
Now
20.
28. 28. Part 3.
Okay. No, I think we read that, no?
Part 3 is over, no? 27.
Okay, go ahead.
Want to do it again?
This you read.
Finished.
This also you read.
Yeah.
Huh. So now it is 28.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Part
Now we are doing part 3. Also note that Baba doesn't talk about chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. He says part 1, part 2, part 3.
Characteristics of the different kingdoms. To achieve complete development of consciousness in the human form, the evolutionary process had to take 7 major leaps. Baba, sorry. Namely, from stone to metal, from metal to vegetable, from vegetable to worm, from worm to fish, from fish to bird, from bird to animal, and finally, from animal to the human being, each possessing different characteristics.
So now Baba will explain the characteristics of each kingdom.
Characteristics of the kingdom of stones and the kingdom of metals. In the stone forms and metal forms, the soul has its initial experiences of the gross world. The kingdom
Even before coming to the stone form, there are gases. But Baba is saying this is too much for a human mind to understand the gases, so he starts from the stone.
The kingdom of metals, like the kingdom of stones, is inorganic and solid. Both kingdoms include within their range a rich variety of species.
Inorganic would mean that does not originate in a living organism. That is inorganic. Go ahead.
In the solid states of stones and metals, life and energy are dormant.
So life and energy are there, but they are not manifest, they are dormant, unmanifest.
Therefore, they are regarded as inanimate.
Inanimate would mean that which lacks the quality or the ability of motion. It cannot move on its own. It's inanimate.
The stone forms and metal forms cannot move about by themselves. That is, they have no voluntary motion. For this reason, the consciousness which associates itself with these forms tends to assert itself through a recumbent horizontal position rather than through an erect position or vertical upright stand in the gross world.
Recumbent would mean lying down in this, not vertical but horizontal position.
Characteristics of the vegetable kingdom. In the vegetable kingdom, consciousness realizes itself as half animate and half inanimate.
So how it progresses? In the stone it was totally inanimate. Now in the vegetable form, half animate, half inanimate. Gradual progression.
The increased consciousness of the vegetable form asserts its existence in the gross world through an upright or erect stand. The vegetable forms have to take the help of some other things such as earth or rock for maintaining an erect position. They can neither stand by themselves nor move voluntarily from place to place since they are rooted in one spot.
So the first progress was, instead of being inanimate, it is half animate, half inanimate. Instead of being recumbent, it has now taken an erect position or a horizontal position, but subject to some help or assistance being given by the soil or earth or whatever.
Characteristics of the kingdom of worms. In worm consciousness, the soul gathers experiences of voluntary movement.
Imagine it's a hurrah, voluntary movement means you can imagine what joy. That's why I love worms, you see. How, what joy it must be experiencing, that it is now able to move on its own. Locomotion, you call it.
It experiences itself as animate.
Now it is fully animate. It knows it has got life.
In its travail to gain more and further consciousness, the worm conscious soul experiences itself in the gross world, first as an invertebrate and later as a vertebrate, and goes on creeping in different species of, diverse species of worms.
Okay. Now here we know what is animate, inanimate. Now invertebrate. Okay, travail. In the travail means arduous journey. Arduous, very painful. Because now this fellow has become a worm all the way from,
Gases to stone.
gases to stone, metal minerals to vegetable, and now living creature, completely living creature, and that is the travail, the journey, arduous journey, very painful journey. And invertebrate means without having the vertebrae. Sometimes they are invertebrate, sometimes they are vertebrate, and they creepy, we call it creepy crawly. They love to creep. What is creeping means moving very slowly with their abdomen almost touching the ground.
Movements are made by crawling by means of pairs of legs.
Sometimes there are pairs of legs, just one.
Some
So many pairs of legs,
Millipede.
8, yeah,
Millipede.
correct, yeah.
And sometimes by pairs of legs and pairs of wings.
See, so and we just pick up a chappal and tongue gaya. So don't think it is bad because we are helping in progress. So they have to go through the struggle for existence and survival. Their senses are developing. They get some. Anyway, we'll come to that later. Huh?
Sometimes it is an amphibian, that is, it has not only voluntary movement on earth but has also mobility in water.
Amphibian with those creatures which can live on earth as well as in water.
For the purpose of this explanation, the worm form includes all worms, insects, reptiles,
Even
and,
reptiles are included in that.
and amphibia of their species. Even when they have legs and wings, they have a tendency to crawl, and they are distinct from birds and from quadruped animals.
Quadruped means four-legged animals. So here Baba is saying, even though they have got feet and wings, they are different from birds, because birds also have feet and wings. So they have still got to progress into fish and bird. So they are different from birds as well as from quadruped, means four-legged or four-feeted animals.
The worm form is recumbent, has no upright or erect stand, and is prone to lie prostrate.
So again, like the rock, vegetable, worm.
Characteristics of the kingdom of fish. The fish conscious soul identifies itself with varied species of fish and experiences the gross world as a living creature in water, a vertebrate endowed with life and sensation and voluntary motion.
So everything, when the fish is there, it identifies itself as a gross. Obviously, the water is gross, and it's a vertebrate, and it moves in the water, and now it has developed fins. Yeah.
It goes through a struggle for sustenance and survival.
Again, the big fish is eating the small ones. So that struggle is always there, even in your struggle for sustenance and survival.
The fish conscious soul does not assert its existence in the gross world through an erect stand, but experiences itself as recumbent, never holding its head high and erect.
So again, fish also, you see that it's a recumbent position.
Characteristics of the kingdom of birds. The bird form enriches, enlightens consciousness with new experiences, since as a feathered vertebrate, It is capable of flying in the air and, with the help of its two legs, of maintaining an erect stand in the gross world.
So just imagine the joy of the first flight. You see what it must be like. We have gone through all this. A baby trying to walk the first time. You know how tuck, 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 tuck. The joy of walking, like motion. You can crawling, walking, and the joy of the first cycle ride, which your daddy or mummy will catch the seat and make you ride a cycle. That joy is being felt by the evolving consciousness of the creation.
Characteristics of the kingdom of animals. The animal form brings to consciousness further expansion since it can yield new experiences through the greater varieties existing in the kingdom of animals. Endowed with life, sensation, and power of voluntary locomotion, quadruped animals have to face a struggle for existence and survival.
See, everywhere there is a struggle for existence and survival. If you do not struggle, if you do not devour the lower species, then how will you? Nobody is going to give a plate of meat to a tiger, okay, have it. It has to struggle, it has to go hunting. And many times, rightly so in a sense, we pity the deer, or something which is attacked. But if it doesn't attack, how is it going to live? How is it going to sustain himself? So this is all in the scheme of things that the lower species are being devoured by the higher species, and that is how the progress of evolution takes place. Predator prey. Correct.
They are sometimes herbivorous and sometimes carnivorous.
Herbivorous, we know somebody which is feeding mainly, chiefly on meat and animals. Yeah. Carnivorous. Oh, I'm sorry.
Grass and carnivorous.
My mistake. Since I am basically carnivorous, I got that first. Sorry. Herbivorous is somebody who lives on plants, like hippopotamus, whatever, zebra, horses, elephant, giraffe, cows. They are herbivorous. I mean, they live on plant life. And carnivorous is that which lives on meat, on another animals. Yeah.
Animal consciousness does not assert its existence in the gross world through erect or upright posture, but has a tendency to look downwards.
See, again, the bird was like this, the animal is like this. So we've been doing all this yoga since creation.
With drooping head. Apes, however, are the most evolved type of animals, and they tend to stand erect like human beings.
Yeah.
Characteristic.
So apes or monkeys, somewhere Baba talks about chimpanzees. So basically, the monkey types, they are the last in the animal.
Characteristics of the kingdom of human beings. In the human form, the evolving consciousness of the soul attains its full development. The process of evolution of consciousness has its terminus in the human form.
Terminus means the end, final point, no further evolution of consciousness.
Here, consciousness is full and complete. When a human being is born, it can only lie prostrate, and it continues to experience this state for a fairly long period. But it soon expresses a tendency first to sit erect and then to stand erect. The fully evolved human consciousness of the soul eventually asserts its existence in the gross world through an upright position. Asterisk.
So when you are born, you are, and then when you take an upright position.
There's an asterisk.
Okay.
Poem by Rumi, The Ascending Soul. I died as mineral and became a plant. I died as plant and rose to animal. I died as animal and I was man. Why should I fear? When was I less by dying? Yet once more I shall die as man to soar with angels blessed. But even from angelhood I must pass on. All except God doth perish. When I have sacrificed my angel soul, I shall become what no mind ever conceived. Oh, let me not exist, for non existence proclaims in organ tones, to him we shall return.
This is the poem by Rumi, where basically he's saying that I have progressed every time I died as a mineral, as a metal, da 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 da. I had progressed, so why should I be afraid to die? Because with every death, I am actually progressing towards the goal, towards the truth. And the final, he says, even as angels, I have to give up my wings. Of course, Baba's explanation of angel is quite different. Baba's explanation of existence is quite different. We won't go into that part of it. Where he says that, let me not exist. For non-existence proclaims in organ tones in huge musical tones, to him we shall return. So that is Rumi's saying, which Baba has given over here. We still have 15 minutes. Any questions? Anybody has any comments, any questions? Are there any questions on the online stuff? No, nothing. Okay.
Part 4, Reincarnation and the Impressionless Equipoise of Consciousness.
Okay, so now we are doing part 4. We are progressing quite fast, apparently very fast, but then much of it would be repeated twice again. So that's good. It will anchor us more and more into our understanding.
Sabhyata will get it by heart.
All right, go ahead.
During the course of evolution of its consciousness, the soul, Atma, while consciously identifying itself with varied, finite, gross forms, was also simultaneously, though unconsciously, identifying itself with its finite, subtle form and its finite, mental form, which associated with the soul in compact, homogeneous, unconscious alliance throughout the entire course of evolution of consciousness, right from the first urge.
How beautifully Baba says that in the gross world, in the gross form, as we are evolving and focusing on the gross, simultaneously, unbeknown to us, without our knowledge, we are also developing our subtle form and mental form. I'll repeat this. See, the soul, while consciously identifying itself with varied, finite, gross forms, was also simultaneously, though unconsciously, identifying itself with its finite subtle form and its finite mental form. The subtle and the mental forms were also gradually, simultaneously developing, which will be finally and fully developed in the first human form. In the first human form, all our three bodies are complete: the gross, the subtle, and the mental. So that's what Baba is saying. Finite and my mental form, which associated with the soul, which means what? The subtle and the mental bodies. In compact, compact means very closely, unbeknown to us, not known to us. Homogeneous means similar, alike. Unconscious alliance, alliance means affinity, connection, union, ally means friendship. This was developing without our knowledge, our subtle and the mental faculties were also developing simultaneously. Throughout the entire course of evolution of consciousness, right from the first urge. Although our focus was only on gross, these were also simultaneously developing unconsciously and very closely.
Although the soul frequently and consciously dissociated itself from the finite gross forms which acted as media to experience the impressions gained in the course of evolving greater and higher consciousness, The soul could never dissociate itself consciously or unconsciously, directly or indirectly from its finite subtle form and its finite mental form.
So Baba is saying that off and on, this fish died, the other fish came. This bird died, the other bird came. This animal died. So conscious alternating birth and death, birth and death, birth and death. So the forms were being given up. But the consciousness of the soul never dissociated. Dissociated means to sever a connection or to separate from the subtle and the mental. So the subtle and the mental continued from the very first urge till realization. It is only the gross that keeps on changing the shape and the form and everything, but the subtle and the mental continued throughout the existence continuously. I'll repeat this. Although the soul frequently and consciously dissociated itself from the finite gross forms, and that means not just the human form, but all the gross forms which acted as media. The gross forms are nothing but media. It's a medium. Greater and thank you. Greater and higher consciousness, the soul could never dissociate itself. Dissociate means to sever connection, to separate its connection, to dissociate itself consciously or unconsciously, directly or indirectly from its finite subtle form and its finite mental form. That means the subtle and the mental body is our constant companion from the very start of the journey till the end of the journey. The gross body is not our companion, it will keep on falling, coming, going. But the subtle and the mental bodies, we are associated with it right from the start till the end.
On the contrary, while the soul dissociated its identification with any one medium of finite gross form, it was the unconscious association of soul with its finite subtle form that fortified the soul, now without any gross medium, with finite energy, the driving force to give a tendency to the consciousness of the soul towards identifying itself with the next medium of the next finite gross form in order to experience the impressions of the last dissociated finite gross form retained and reflected by the finite mental form of this soul.
So, what Baba is trying to convey, we have got a gross body and a subtle body, which is the energy firing, coding us. What is making us wake up every day in the morning? This subtle energy. Get up, spend me, spend the samskaras, right? And where are the samskaras lodged? In the mental body. So the impressions are reflected in the mental body, or it is staying in the mental body, and the subtle body is pushing us to wake up and spend the remaining or residual samskaras in the morning first. So now you will be able to understand. On the contrary, while the soul dissociated its identification with any one medium of form, any one medium, body, physical body is not there. It was the unconscious consciousness of soul in its subtle form that fortified means to give vigor, to give energy, to give strength. It is the subtle, finite, subtle body which gave energy to form that fortified the soul, now without any gross medium, because now I am dead, I don't have a gross medium, with finite energy. It fortified the soul with finite energy, which is the driving force, to give a tendency to the consciousness of the soul towards identifying itself with the next medium of the next finite form,
Gross form.
gross form. That means it is the energy of the subtle body which is fortifying the soul, which is giving push to the soul to take another next gross form. In order to experience the impressions of the last dissociated finite gross form. We have seen that earlier, that my next form would be nothing but a consolidated mold of the impressions of the last gross form dropped. So here it is saying that it will give the fortifying the soul to give a tendency to the consciousness of the soul towards identifying itself with the next medium of the next finite gross form in order to experience the impressions of the last dissociated finite gross form retained and reflected by the finite mental form of this soul. That means the mental form of that particular soul, the impressions are retained in the mind, and it is the subtle body which is provoking, which is goading the consciousness of the soul to take the next higher gross form in order to spend the last impressions which had been gathered in the last form and which are now loaded or reflected in the finite mental body of that particular soul. Very clear and very superb. We are just 2 minutes away. I don't want to start a new paragraph. If there are still any questions, ask. Tomorrow we are meeting at the same time, same place. Yes, it is grace that we are having 2 consecutive turns. If there are any questions, you can ask. Great.
Thank you, Baba.
Okay, then I think we still have a minute.
Yeah, we have.
Baba is still with us, so we need to entertain him somehow. Any comments? Anything to comment? If there are no questions, even negative comments are welcome. In fact, they are more welcome, because then we tend to improve. Yes, please go ahead.
Not negative, this is a question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So you had mentioned about mukti. You can get mukti by taking
Baba's name.
Baba's name, I think, the last
Yes,
step.
Baba said that.
So people who are in the subtle world, they are more evolved than us.
Correct.
How come they don't find that shortcut?
Well, it's a good question. The understanding that I have is that the understanding, as I said, once you are on the planes, once you are on the involutionary journey, your destination is God realization and not mukti. Moksha is only experiencing infinite bliss, whereas God realization, somebody asked a similar question. Say, for example, Baba's sister Mani, or Mera, Baba had said that money would come as become a perfect master in some lifetime, 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. I am sure she would have remembered Baba when she dropped her body. But her destiny is to become God realized, and therefore she has to come back again because she is on the path. Now, for those of us who are not on the spiritual path, not on the involutionary journey, Baba says that if you are not destined to be God realized, at least you have a shortcut, a way out of this rigmarole of birth and death, by simply remembering me when you breathe your last. And somebody asked, remembering me would mean what? And Baba had clarified. It could be any God's name, any avatar's name, any perfect master's name, because they are all impressionless. They don't have impressions. So when you remember them, when we breathe our last, you become one with him in consciousness and experience only infinite bliss eternally. That is the understanding which I have. So it's a good shortcut, and I think unless you are destined for God realization, then even though you may remember Baba, maybe he'll say, come on, go down and do some work for me. Because after all, perfect masters is nothing but actually, Baba said they are like scavengers, Like how the scavengers clean all the dirt. They clean all the dirt of the samskaras of everyone. So it's a job. It's work. It's not just pleasure. The pleasure is there. The bliss is there at the background. But they have to work for humanity. Any more questions, comments, suggestions? Thank you, Baba. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Thank you, Baba. Thank you.